In this video, we're going to be taking a look at comparing fraction, factors, and products. Try saying that 3 times fast. And the essential question that we are going to take a look at is, how does the size of a product compare to the size of one factor when multiplying fractions? So I want you to turn to page 307 in your Go Math book, and we are going to take a look at this concept. A couple things we want to take a look at the very top of this section. It says multiplication can be thought of as resizing one number by another number. For example, 2 times 3 will result in a product that is 2 times as great as 3. Now, something that we need to talk about. Okay, so we can see that when we multiply two whole numbers, the product is greater than either factor. Okay, however, let's take a look at that next question. It says, what happens to the size of a product when a number is multiplied by a fraction rather than a whole number? Okay, so we will take a look at this, and that's what we want to explore. So let's take a look at a problem. It says, during the week, the Smith family ate 3/4 of a box of cereal. Okay, so the first step with our model, pretty much know that we need to shade in 3/4 of the cereal. So this represents the box, 3/4 of it. Okay, so we can shade the model to show 3/4 of a box of cereal. Okay, so we need to write an expression for 3/4 of one box of cereal, which actually represents 3/4 times 1. Okay, so answering the question here, will the product be equal to, greater than, or less than 1? We were talking about what happens to the size of a product when a number is multiplied by a fraction rather than a whole number. Okay, and we can see that the product will actually be less than 1 because we are taking a fraction of that whole number. So a fraction of that whole number we could see would be less than 1. Okay, because we have 3/4 of 1 is actually 3/4, which would be less than 1. Okay, let's continue to explore this question. It says there for letter B, the Ling family has 4 boxes of cereal. They ate 3/4 of all the cereal during that week. Okay, so what we need to do is shade the model to show 3/4 of 4 boxes of cereal. So we have our 4 boxes of cereal, all divided up into 4 sections. Why 4 sections? Because 3/4 of each box is eaten. That's the denominator. So we're going to shade in each one to show how much has been eaten. So 3/4 for this one, 3/4 for the second one. We'll continue to shade these all in so we can actually see 3/4 of 4. Okay, so write an expression for 3/4 of 4 boxes of cereal. 3/4 times 4 is right here. Okay, so we actually have 12/4 shaded in, and 12/4 can actually equal 3. Not actually can, actually does equal 3. Okay, now will the product be equal to, greater than, or less than 4? And once again, we can see that it is less than 4. So do not always think that multiplication means both factors are going to increase in size. Okay, but whenever you're multiplying a whole number by a fraction, that fraction, or that whole number, or the product I should say, will always be less than that whole number, because you're taking a fraction of that whole number, and that's what you're trying to find. Okay, now what we will do is take a look at this, and for fraction times a fraction, multiplying a fraction by a fraction, it says the Carter family has only 1/2 of a box of cereal at the beginning of the week. Now they ate 3/4 of the 1/2 box of cereal. So now what we need to do first of all is we need to shade in 1/2 of the box of cereal. Okay, so what I will do, I'll use the orange to shade that in. This represents 1/2 of this whole box of cereal. Okay, so I have 4 out of 8 squares shaded in. So 1/2 of my cereal is shaded in. Okay, now what the Carter family did is they actually shaded in, or I'm sorry, they actually ate 3/4 of this 1/2. Okay, so I can see that this half section is divided up into 4 parts. So I need to color in 3 out of this 4, 3 out of the 4 rectangles. Okay, and the reason for that is 3/4 of this 1/2. Okay, so I can color in 3/4 of this 1/2 again. So 1, 2, 3/4 of that 1/2. Okay, so an expression, okay, for this would be 3/4 times 1/2. Okay, now we can easily see that 3/4 times 1/2, or 3/4 of 1/2, okay, you can see 3 out of 8 are shaded in twice. Okay, so 3/8 would be my answer. Okay, now will the product be equal to, greater than, or less than 1/2, first of all? Okay, and also less than 3/4, and actually both answers, or both fractions, or the answer would be actually less than both 1/2 and 3/4, because my answer was 3/8, which is less than both 1/2 and 3/4. Okay, let's look at this another way here. And it says you can use a diagram at the top of page 308. It says you can use a diagram to show the relationship between the products when a fraction is multiplied or scaled, resized by a number. Okay, so let's take a look at letter A. It says 1 times 3/4. Now, what you need to do is you need to locate, first of all, 3/4 on the diagram. Okay, which would be located 3/4. We can see 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, which is right here. Okay, and what we need to do now, we want to shade the distance from 0. We'll just color that in right there. Okay, then we can graph the point to show 1 of 3/4. Okay, so we can see that this section here is 1 of 3/4, and let me even have my section a little bit better there. So we're graphing it, we can shade it in right there. Okay, now the next one, letter B, and we're going to take a look at the answers at the bottom there on the page 308 here in just a second. It says 1/2 times 3/4. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to locate 3/4 on the number line again, which is right here. And then what we want to do is we want to shade that distance from 0. Want to shade that distance from 0 to that 3/4. Then what we want to do is graph a point to show 1/2 of 3/4. Okay, so we can see 1, 2, 3/4. All right, and what we need to do is actually show 1/2 of 3/4, which falls right in the middle, just like that. Okay, that's right in between my 0 and 3/4. Now the next step, or letter C, we have 4 times 3/4. Okay, so what we need to do first of all is locate 3/4 on the diagram, okay, which we've done multiple times, which is right here. We want to shade that distance from 0, just like this. Now what we have to do is graph a point to show 4 times 3/4. Okay, so what we can do is continue to add 3/4 each time until we finally get to where we need to go. Okay, so what we have here is we have, there's 3/4, so that would be 3/4 times 1, and then we would have 3/4 times 2, 3/4 times 3, and then finally 3/4 times 4. and we can put our point right there, which would be 3. Now let's take a look at the questions that they're asking us. Okay, so it says the product of 1 and 3/4 will be blank 3/4 equal to, greater than, or less than. And we can easily see with letter A that it would be equal to. Okay, so we'll write here equal to. So that's equal to 3/4. We can see right there, our point there is right at 3/4. Now the product of a number less than 1 and 3/4 will be, and we need to think about that. So the answer would be less than 3/4 and less than the other factor. Why is that? Because the product of a number which is going to be less than 1. So in other words, if I have 5/6 times 3/4, it's going to be less than 3/4 and also less than the other factor. So both of these would be less than. Let's write that in. Okay, we'll even I'll put LT, but I want you to write it out yourself. Okay, now let's take a look at the next question. The product of a number greater than 1 and 3/4. I'm sorry, 1 and 3/4. So what we can see for that, it's going to be greater than 3/4. Okay, so greater. So greater than, okay, greater than 3/4 and actually less than the other factor. And I'll put LT for that one. But yeah, I want you to write that in. Okay, so hopefully that helps you understand it a little bit better as we're moving through the video. Okay, so let's take a look at this share and show on page 309. So we have 4 times 7/8, and the first thing you need to do is find 7/8 and then shade that into the 0. And then what you have to do is multiply 7/8 times 4. Okay, 7/8 times 4. We can see right there that that gives us 3 and 1, 2, 3, 4/8. Okay, or 3 and 1/2. So we can see easily that 4 times 7/8 for this will be greater than 7/8. So let's take a look at these two questions all by yourself. We have 6/11 times 1. Will it be equal to, greater than, or less than 6/11? 4 times 3/5 will be equal to, greater than, or less than 3/5. I want you to complete these problems by yourself. When you're finished, you can press play and I'll have the answer for you. Pause the video now. Okay, here are the two answers. 6/11 times 1 will be equal to 6/11, and 4 times 3/5 will be greater than 3/5. Why is that the case? Because anything times 1 is always going to be equal to the other factor. However, we're taking 3/5 and we're multiplying that by 4, so obviously we're getting 4 3/5. So that would obviously be greater than the 3/5. Okay, so we have the essential question to conclude the video. How does the size of a product compare to the size of one factor when multiplying fractions? And you can see the answer, which is right there at the bottom for this essential question. And this does conclude the video on comparing fractions, factors, and products. If you have any questions about this concept, please come and see me.